Hi there, it's Natasha and thank you so much for joining me today. I have said it many times before in videos that colouring is not necessarily my thing. So today's video is if colouring is not your thing, this is the best technique. Now I have the Simon Hurley Flower Picking Friends here. I have been really enjoying Simon's inks recently. I kind of came across them, used them for a little bit and really fell in love with their properties. They are an amazing ink pad, so I decided to give one of his stamp sets a go, and it is a 6x8 stamp set, so it's a really big stamp set. And I love the big flowers. I love something that takes up the whole of my card front. And the other thing about this stamp set in particular is that there is so much variety with the sentiments. So I feel like I'm kind of getting everything. I'm getting the images and I'm getting the sentiments, which is really important value for money when you're choosing a stamp set. So I have put a couple on my stamping platform and I am going to be doing some masking. I have got some Gina masking paper here. This is just a little scrap, this circle, and I have placed the little bear as well as my sentiment. That is already on the door of my stamping platform, and I'm going to pop down that little piece of masking paper. I just want to catch the bear. I don't need to do any masking of words, just the little bear, and my little magnet was in the road, so I just need to pop it down. I don't have to make sure it's a perfect impression or anything because it's just a mask. Now I'm going to ink this up in some VersaFine Onyx black ink, and I'm using this ink because I want to heat emboss this. I'm going to be doing a little bit of resist with the words. You could either stamp the sentiment before or after, it doesn't matter. But because this is a pigment ink and it stamps beautifully, it is great for fine detail. And I'm going to emboss this in some clear embossing powder. Now I always choose to go for the super fine embossing powders over the regular or just the normal fine embossing powders, because that way it's kind of doing double duty. If you have a nice fine or detailed sentiment or stamp that you want to emboss, you are able to. Now here where I'm going to put this gorgeous big lily flower in the bear's hands, because it says I picked this just for you on your birthday. I've put the stem out really nice and straight, but I'm just going to pick it up here and shift it so that it curves down my page a little bit more, so it really looks like he's holding on to it. And I don't want the stem to cross over his body, only over his hands. So it's really fun with a stamping platform or using an acrylic block where you're able to kind of move your acrylic or photopolymer stamps around so that they work for whatever project you are using them on. I have fussy cut around my little bear mask, and that's going to go over the top of him because I don't want the flower stem to go through his hands. I want it to appear like the flower stem is behind that first hand of the little bear, so it's in between his hands. And when you are masking, you need to remember that whatever you stamp first will be at the front. So that's the main rules when it comes to masking. I am again going to heat emboss this with some clear embossing powder just so that it matches the rest of the shine on the other images that I have already stamped. Then I will melt it with my embossing heat tool. And then I have said it before in a previous video, I pretty much just stick with Distress Oxide inks. And then I have the VersaFine clear ones as my pigment inks, and I didn't really want any other ink sets. I wasn't looking for any more, and then a neighbor encouraged me to borrow her Simon Hurley inks, and I found them to be way better than I was expecting. In fact, I was kind of blown away when I tried them. And I have a really small craft space, so I don't have room for everything that I want or need, or I just have a very small space, so I have to choose carefully what I want in my craft room. And I found that these inks were definitely a gap in my crafting tools, so I did choose to go ahead and invest in the Simon Hurley inks. I am not paid by Ranger or by Simon Hurley or anything to say these things. This is definitely my own opinion. Simon very kindly sent me a couple of bits and pieces in the post, which I so appreciate. But that was long after I had really tried out his inks and decided that they were worthwhile. I have to be a pretty tough critic when it comes to what is able to fit in my little craft space. So you saw that I added the mask to the lily as well, and then just to save on low-tack tape, I actually cut this piece in half because I am going to mask off a border. You could also do this with some removable adhesive and some copy paper or some post-it notes, just whatever you have handy that you're able to mask it off with. I'm using the Tropical Tango, Crown Me, Clear Skies and Rosy Cheeks. As I said, these are Simon's inks. The reasons that I love his inks are they are water reactive. They blend beautifully, a lot better than many other dye inks that I have tried. And so I just, as I said, I have to be really tough with what fits, and these were a good fit for me. So I'm using the scrapbook.com rounded domed blending tools, and these are also another secret to ink blending. But as I said at the beginning of this video, if colouring is not your thing, I have masked off the bear and the lily. And I have also masked off a gorgeous white border because I think I forgot to say that this is all on my card base. So it's a completely one layer card. It is just stamped onto the card base. There's no card front or anything that I'm going to glue down onto it. And all I'm doing is I'm going to ink blend around that entire image. Now, if you didn't want to do the masking, you could just leave a little bit of a gap and not go right up to the edges of your image. And that way you wouldn't have to do the masking, but I feel a whole lot more secure when I have the masking down because I am just not that good to avoid images. So I am just using those 4 inks that I said just before. And although some of these inks that I'm using could be quite bright and bold, I am choosing to use a relatively light layer of them. And there are colours that I'm putting next to each other which sometimes would make a little bit of mud, but I'm making sure that they don't blend right into each other. I'm kind of keeping them a little bit separate, which will be fine when we lift up all of the masks. It looks like a little bit of a hot mess right now, but my favourite part of masking is when you take off the masks. So that reveal is awesome, which I'll show you in just a minute. But I didn't want this card to be a really kind of bright, bold, in-your-face card. So I'm going to do something in just a minute to tone down these inks as well. Again, completely optional. You could just leave it with a little bit of the ink blending. Now, the reason I chose to use the dye inks over the oxide inks was just that these are ever so slightly more transparent, but the oxide inks would work perfectly, and there are some gorgeous light colours in that range too. So here I've just got a stencil and I'm using the Hero Arts Unicorn Pigment ink, and I am just using a little makeup sponge to go around the outside. It's okay because everything is all masked off still, so I'm not going to get inside of my image. But I just chose a relatively plain stencil and I'm putting on a light-ish layer of the white pigment ink. And again, this just tones down those colours just a little bit. This step is definitely one that you can miss if you want to. But I felt like with this card design, I either had 2 options, and that was to leave the outside around the image relatively blank and white and plain, or maybe just a really light stenciling. And then I would have to colour in the flower and the bear with some alcohol markers or some watercolour or something like that. But this way, I don't have to worry about any particular colouring. You could do any design that you wanted to around the outside of your image. So this is my favourite part here. Look how gorgeous and stark white the flower and the bear, and that border just really makes it. I'm really glad that I did the extra border. And then just for a couple of little extra touches here, again, these are completely optional, but because my flower is going to stay all white, I'm adding some, this one is the scrapbook.com clear glitter brush, and that just puts a really nice layer of sparkle. If you wanted to, you could probably add some glossy accents or a different product along those lines onto the flower, and that would definitely help it stand out. I'm going to use a tiny little bit of the diamond stickles just on those little center of the flower there, and you can see them nice and shiny. It's a little bit hard to pick up all of that shine from the glitter pen because of the daytime light that I was filming in. And then I decided to go back and add the glitter brush pen to all of the white, including the little bear as well. Again, completely optional. So this is just one of the options that you can use if you don't feel like colouring in your images and worrying about shading or shadows or anything like that. And this to me looks like a really gorgeous, completely one layer card. So thank you so much for joining me today. Let me know in the comment section down below if this feels like a good option for you. And I also have a Facebook page where you can head on over and show me your take on this technique. I absolutely love seeing your designs and your cards. So thank you so much, and I really look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thanks, bye!